In other words, when people get married, how many of you in here are married? Who had to give you a manual on how to have babies? It just happens. Babies are just really a byproduct of a love affair. Are you with me? So now if we're going to have revival, and revival is simply new babies being born into the kingdom, then why in the world don't we have births? Because we're not in love with the one who can bring the children. Are you with me? So we've got to come back and fall in love with Jesus and begin to understand true intimacy with him. And when we do, friends, revival's just got to happen. How many of you women, well, no, that's not a good question. Maybe I can say this and get away with it. I don't know. But when a woman usually gets pregnant, she's got to go out and buy maternity clothes at the first time she knows she's pregnant. And then when they hardly even show, she's got to walk around like this. They're proud of that. Huh? Now, some of you ladies understand what I'm talking about, okay? I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but there's something, I mean, when you find out you're going to have a baby, you can't wait to tell somebody. How many know that? When it's done right. Now, I mean, if you know you're not married or something, I mean, there's another thing. But I'm talking about God's purposes. You're so proud of that thing, aren't you? Well, what happens is that when we begin to come back to that love affair, we can't keep our mouth shut about, number one, our husband. We can't keep our mouth shut about our husband or our wife. When you're going with each other, maybe because I'm in a different time zone, you know, mentally than a lot of you, but it used to be, we used to hang out on the phone all the time talking for hours and say nothing. Now, did that ever happen here? I mean, I don't know, but I mean, in America, man, you talk and take up the telephone. My dad, my mom, get off the phone. What are you talking about? I don't know, man. I don't know what we're talking about. Anyone know what I'm talking about? When you fall in love, man, you cannot keep your mouth shut about the one that you love. And yet we don't have Christians out here witnessing. Why? You must not love Jesus, or you be talking about him. And that's another part of this whole thing about revival is I'm going to give you a key so you can be a witness without ever being intimidated. I promise you, and it works. I mean, that's another message. That's not today's message. But I want you to understand that revival is simply a side effect or a byproduct of intimacy with the Lord. Are you with me? So why run after that? You know, it's like when you get married, you know, it's not a big thing to have kids. They just come along at just the right time. And so let's come back to this thing about developing this love affair with Jesus. And when that is developing, he's going to cause all these other things to happen. Now, when God created man, he created man, and I believe that the account that we have in Genesis, that God took man, formed the dust of the earth into the shape of a man, and blew into his nostrils, and he became a living being. Now, if you don't believe that, if you think you came out of the sea, that's okay. If you think you're a monkey, that's okay too. But I believe in the creation account that we find in Genesis. And if it's true, and I believe it to be true, and it's never been disproved, when God created Adam, the way that he created Adam is different than the way he created us. And God could, I believe, God could have taken, if he decided to keep that same idea in his mind to create man, he could have created 50,000, every one of us in this room could have been a lump of dirt. And we blew into our nostrils, we would become a living being. But he didn't choose to create us that way. Is Adam in here this morning? Okay, because if Adam was here, then I'd have to single him out. But the rest of us were all created the same way. Adam was created different. Are you with me? So as I begin to look at this, I begin to see then that God had a system that he demanded intimacy to reproduce. Are you with me? I'm talking about the God thing. I'm not talking about this thing that's out of control where people are having children out of wedlock. I'm talking about God's intent and purposes. God's intent and purposes is that when he created a woman, and how was a woman created? It was evidently, we don't understand the fullness of it, but Adam had within him the ability to reproduce, and then God took out of him womb man, that's where the word woman comes from, and creates another individual, And from then on, the only way that anyone could recreate was to have something physical in the intimacy. Are you with me? And God has given us something physical also, and the church has passed over it for centuries, at least in our time. God has given something to the church that's physical, that produces intimacy and produces children.